Good evening. I call to order the meeting of the mayor and board of trustees of the Village of Burr Ridge from Monday, February 24, 2025. Let's see. Young man, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you. Are you taking the duties tonight, Evan? Roll call, please.
Trustee Smith?
Here.
Trustee Mytel?
Here.
Trustee Snyder?
Yes.
Trustee Paveza?
Here.
Trustee Schiappa?
Here.
Trustee Francis?
Here.
Mayor Grasso?
Here.
7 present.
Thank you. There are no presentations or public hearings tonight. Item 4 is the consent agenda. An item shall be removed from the consent agenda at the request of any one trustee or anyone present at the meeting. Those items marked with an asterisk are considered to be on the consent agenda. A roll call shall be taken on the approval of the consent agenda and recorded in the minutes as an omnibus vote. If an item is removed from the consent agenda, it will be discussed by the board, opened for public comment, and voted upon during this meeting. 5 minutes. A, approval of regular board meeting of January 13, 2025. B, receive and file street and pathway committee meeting of January 13, 2025. C, receive and file plan commission meeting minutes of February 3, 2025. And D, receive and file plan commission meeting of February 17, 2025. 6, ordinances. A, approval of an ordinance annexing certain territory, 1 Normandy Court, 12 Normandy Court, and 8S 255 Normandy Court. B, approval of an ordinance rezoning property upon annexation from the R1 Single Family Residence District to the R3 Single Family Residence District of the Burr Ridge zoning ordinance, Z 15 2024, 1 and 12 Normandy Court, Arshad and Gull. C, approval of an ordinance rezoning upon annexation from the R1 Single Family Residence District to the R3 Single Family Residence District of the Burr Ridge zoning ordinance Z 18 2024 8S 255 Normandy Court, Stojovetsky. D, approval of an ordinance amending Chapter 8 Stormwater Runoff of the Burr Ridge Municipal Code, adopt Cook County Watershed Management Ordinance by reference as amended on January 9, 2025. And E, approval of an ordinance authorizing the sale by online auction of personal property owned by the Village of Burr Ridge for police and public works vehicles. Excuse me. 7, resolutions. Approval of a resolution approving the annual publication of the Village of Burr Ridge zoning map. B, approval of a resolution approving the use of motor fuel tax MFT funds. C, approval of a resolution approving a park facilities hold harmless agreement with Burr Ridge Park District. And D, approval of a resolution approving an intergovernmental agreement for participation in the Illinois Public Works Mutual Aid Network, IPWMAN. Considerations. B, approval of award of the road servicing contract to Schroeder Asphalt Services of Huntley, Illinois in the amount of $599,100. C, approval of an award of contract for purchase of a public works portable generator from Multiquip Inc. of Cypress, California in the amount of $47,845.77. D, approval of an award of contract to Alexander Equipment of Lisle, Illinois for purchase of a Rayco RG55TR stump grinder in the amount of $65,253.12. E, approval to direct staff to prepare an ordinance approving text amendments to section 6A4 and 6A5 of the zoning ordinance amending regulations for attached garage door height, Z02 2025. F, approval of an employment contract between the village and the Metropolitan Alliance of Police Burr Ridge Command, Chapter Number 13. G, approval of an award of a 3-year contract for mosquito abatement services with Clark Environmental Mosquito Management of St. Charles, Illinois, in the total amount of $146,710. H, approval of request for a raffle license for Willowbrook Burr Ridge Chamber of Commerce and Hosting Facility 5 Seasons Sports Complex for their Trivia Night fundraiser on March 7, 2025. I, approval of request for a raffle license for the Gower School PRO and Hosting Facility Gower Middle School for their fun fair on March 7, 2025. J, approval of request for a raffle license for the Hinsdale Infant Welfare Society and Hosting Facility Marriott Burr Ridge for their fundraiser on March 23, 2025. K, approval of request for a raffle license for Good Shepherd Manor and Hosting Facility Marriott Chicago Southwest Burr Ridge for their fundraiser on April 6, 2025. L, approval of vendor list dated January 27, 2025 for fiscal year 2025 in the amount of $2,752,885.32 for all funds, plus $236,675.22 for payroll period ending January 4, 2025 for a grand total of $2,989,560.54. M, approval of vendor list dated February 10, 2025 for fiscal year 2025 in the amount of $314,668.67 for all funds, plus $237,580.62 for payroll period ending January 18, 2025 for a grand total of $552,249.29. And finally, N, approval of a vendor list dated February 24, 2025 for fiscal year 2025 in the amount of $540,303.99 for all funds, plus $238,527.38 for payroll period ending February 1st, 2025 for a grand total of $778,831.37. Can I get a motion to approve the following items on the consent agenda? 5A through D, 6A through E, 7A through D, 8B through N.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion by the trustees? Any discussion or comments by the public? Roll call, please.
Trustee Skiappa.
Yes.
Trustee Francis.
Yes.
Trustee Paveza.
Yes.
Trustee Smith.
Yes.
Trustee Mytal.
Yes.
Trustee Snyder.
Yes.
6-0.
6-0. Since we have the budget to be discussed, we do have a number of people here that might want to speak at public comment. I'd like to, with the board's consent, go now to public comment, item 9. Do I have consensus on that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
This we'll get to public comment. Public comment, is anybody here that wishes to address the board?
Good evening. My name is Steve Less. I live in Chestnut Hills in Burr Ridge, longtime resident. I'm here basically to ask the help of the mayor and the board with some problems we're having with the SEA trucking in regards to some additional lights that they have put in and the amount of noise that they're making in the evenings. 10 years or so, Mayor Grasso, I think Guy, Al, Steve Stricker worked on what we call a SEA annexation agreement, which is a document that was put together by the village, signed by the village and SEA Trucking, making agreements towards their lights and the amount of noise that they were going to do. And recently, we feel that they are violating that agreement. I know Mayor Grasso and probably Mr. Evans have been sent pictures of lights shining in people's windows and things of that nature. And again, I just wanted to make sure that you were all aware of it and hoping that we can count on your help in mitigating the lights and the noise. So thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Anyone else?
Donna Ryan, 113 Chestnut Hills Circle, Board President for Chestnut Hills. With all the complaints that came since December, it was also voiced that the noise has really gotten worse.
This is again about SIA, right?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Very busy year for them, but more noise and more dropping of trailers with shaking of the residents' homes. So what we're looking for is something more permanent. We're talking about, you know, a wall, a sound barrier, something that would probably take place, you know, help with the lighting also, because the fixtures are supposed to be not visible and below the barrier. Right now we have a fence that's wood, and it really doesn't reduce the sound at all. It is really a screening. So I'm thinking there are barriers for pickleball courts. Why wouldn't we have a barrier wall for industrial noise? Granted, I remember the first study that was done that the noise would come, you know, over the wall. However, it does help. It really would. Now, Steve is like 200 feet away from them, so he bears the brunt of all of it. And most people have gotten new windows and soundproofing, because it can really get bad. And it's from 9:30 in the evening till 5 a.m. in the morning. So the only thing I see that's good is that we don't have the backup beeping as loud as it was. I'm not on that surrounding SAIA, but I used to hear it in the compound where I am. But I don't hear that much, but Steve said he hears it a little. So we're looking for something more permanent. And just because we feel like we're in the middle of all this, and with all the complaints and everything, the board thought to go to our attorney and have a statement read for our stance on the whole issue. And we sent it to you, Mayor, about it. We need something more permanent because the personnel, I'm sure, changes. So it's just getting worse, really is. Now we have 2 nuisances instead of just the noise. So thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who'd like to address the board? It's okay.
I reside in Chestnut Hill Circle. recent
Name,
resident.
please?
Oh, I'm sorry, John Summers. My unit at 136 Chestnut Hills backs up onto the wetlands. And I have a rather idyllic view, and perhaps as Donna touched upon, I apologize for being a bit tardy this evening. The lights of Wrigley Field appeared and has changed certainly the evenings and that view greatly. We prepared something, I'll read it quickly. In December of '24, this past year, I came home from work at night to find SIA had installed 15 plus new LED lights. And these were high lumen fixtures on the north side of their property, pretty much flooding the backyards of our units. Those lighting fixtures were installed above the barrier wall, as was pointed out perhaps by Donna. Prior to this time, the backyard and natural wetlands behind Chestnut Hills were pitch black. Zero light pollution, in other words. And we also learned, as we inquired, that there apparently was an agreement when SIA went in place to keep their lights below a wall. I don't know too much about their property. I've never been on it. We then, through the board of directors, made the village aware of the newly installed lights, and she took this, the missus took this from the annexation agreement, paragraph 6, section D. I could jump ahead and just say that since the complaint, one of our fellow residents, Mr. Phil Loricella, reached out, and I believe Saya directed the lights and pitched them down a bit more. So they're quite visible, but not as glaring and offensive. But then peculiarly, 4 new lights appeared, considerably higher in elevation than the 15 LEDs that went in. I guess I can just speak extemporaneously. When I was made aware that there was an agreement between Saya and the village board, I'm certain in a way that these folks did not do this with any malcontent or intention. But one suspects, as we all know, over the span of 20 years plus, there are changes in personnel, and perhaps the new site manager is there and said, boy, these are going to save us money. They're not incandescent. Let's fill up our yard and certainly reduce any potential of theft, et cetera. But what they were probably unaware of is that just over that wall, a fair number of people reside, and there is honestly a diminishment in our view, and especially spring, summer, and fall evenings where we spend a lot of time out on our decks. So having said that, I do hope that somebody on behalf of us in the village can reach out to the Saya folks and perhaps give them a little religion and remind them that there was an agreement in place, and let them know, elevate the wall. Aren't they, I think, a global company? So they spend $1 million to make the wall higher. I imagine between here and Tennessee, their federal taxes are enormous enough that this could be a CapEx project and completely written off on their taxes. So I don't mean to come across as being glib, but that's our feeling. It's a problem that should be addressed, and we hope you guys help us. And ladies, thank you so much.
Anyone else like to address the board?
My name's Frank Berkowitz. I'm at 7310 Chestnut Hills Drive. I won't repeat everything that's going on. The lights are so doggone obvious. I mean, it's ridiculous. But I'd like for you to also focus on the noise. Now, it's something where a truck may back up and it goes beep, beep, beep. There must be 15 trucks at a time doing that. I am wondering if they're staging material to move from one truck to the other and they're using a lift truck to do it. Because the amount of noise for the length of time, it's not just a truck backing up. There's lift trucks out in that yard that's moving material around. So if you'd look into the noise, my neighbors and I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Anyone else like to address the board? We usually don't comment and public comment, but I'm the mayor, so I can decide what I want to do. This has history, and just I know the people in Chestnut Hills understand it, but so the public does. Saya leases that yard. The owner of the yard actually was a Burr Ridge resident, maybe still is at the time. So that was leased to them on a long-term basis, and as you may remember, that was not in the village of Burr Ridge at the time. We were trying to get them to come in, and it was only later that we were able to get them to come in, I think. And in any event, there is an agreement in place. I was part of the team that negotiated it, so I will look at it, we'll look at it. We understand the noise issue. Is it not only the beeping, but is it the drops, when it hits? Yeah, that was the two issues then, and the lighting, of course, we thought we addressed back then on the height of it. So we'll assume that there is no malice involved, but we will address it, and Evan will be in touch with Steve and others who are leading this, okay?
I can provide just a little more
Okay,
detail if you'd like.
go ahead.
So we've been mostly working on the light, not me personally, not as familiar with the sound issue, but I'm sure that's one we can certainly get up to speed on with you all. The lights are going to get fixed in the next few weeks. I just can't give you an exact date. We've been very in contact with their federal office or the national office down in Atlanta. They've been very responsive. They're aware that, as was stated, there was a non-malice mistake made or a change in how the light works, and they're aware that that's impactful. I've seen it with my own eyes in the pitch at night after a meeting. So I'm aware of what you're looking at, and that'll get fixed in the near future. I just can't give you, this exact date, but I'm very aware of that issue. We'll be working more on the noise issue with you all. I'm just not as educated about that one, as I said, but again, we'll be working on solutions to make sure that's more rectified and better desired for the neighbors.
Okay. Any other public comment? All right, that's, one more comment?
Would it be possible to add this to the agenda, or is that asking for too much?
Well, I will tell you this, if, I'm sure all the board is interested in making sure this is being handled properly. If necessary, it will be on the agenda. I hope not, but we'll keep that request in mind. Okay, so that's the last item that we have on our agenda tonight, except for the budget. And of course, you're welcome to sit around for the budget, but does anybody else think they have an item on the agenda that hasn't been addressed yet? Okay, all right, that takes us back to the regular agenda. Considerations A, consideration of draft fiscal year 2026 budget. Evan,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Excuse me.
That was, I think we hand.
It's approved.
Is that, that's
It's
all
approved.
been approved? By the way, welcome to Burr Ridge.
Welcome.
All right, well, as was stated, we're on to the budget. Always a happy time of year. Very pleased to present this document. This document is now the board's document. This is something that staff has prepared to reflect the will of the board. So at this point, this is subject to your direction. Just want to start with some chronology here. So today, we're presenting the 26 budget. This is high level, it's educational, it's here for discussion and direction, making no final decisions tonight. The next time we will bring this up to the agenda on the board is March 10th. This is your last opportunity to provide any final direction or changes to the budget. We will bring it back on April 14th for a public hearing and adoption of the budget ordinance. No changes will be accepted at this meeting. This is a very long ordinance that cannot be amended. So March 10th is really the last time. We're not going to present this entire thing again on March 10th. This will be if there's any changes, final direction, things like that at that point. So it will not be this whole spiel again. I do want to begin by thanking Anne Marie and Heather, who are in the audience tonight, our two financial consultants. I've gotten a lot of compliments from the board, speaking to them here. I've gotten a lot of compliments from the board about the presentation of the budget. The amount of meetings we've had to get this down to the focus we have is because of those two. They do a great job of keeping us aligned and focus, on point, on schedule, and I want to recognize them personally for the work they've done. The reason why the budget is in such good shape is because they take care of it. So I just want to recognize their work right off the bat. Getting into it, Anne Marie, you want to come up and start us off?
Thank you for that, Evan. I appreciate it. Love working here, so you guys make it easy to get things done. So I'll start kind of with the fund balance analysis page of the presentation. So this is all of the village's funds. You can call it the cash in the bank, reserves, fund balance, different terminologies, but it's basically the funds that the village has on hand at the end of each year. So I'm just going to kind of go through, we've consolidated funds over the last few years, so you see a lot less in the list. The majority of them are consolidated into one capital fund instead of having 4 separate ones. The general fund, this kind of just shows a trend. There's been an increase in the general fund balance over the years. The majority of that is due to, in 2024, we received about a $2.2 million windfall of sales tax from the state from an entity that had not been paying sales tax, and the taxes were finally collected. So you'll see it kind of flatten out again going forward. Motor fuel tax, we use that fund to fund our capital, and we transfer any taxes we receive for the year out to the capital improvement, or into the general fund, I'm sorry, to partially fund our streets operations. Hotel motel tax fund is a fund that supports our special events every year, as well as we're able to transfer money out of that fund to fund our capital plan. Business district, you can see that that's been growing over the years. Eventually, we'll have a significant pot of money that will be able to do something significant within our business district. Capital, that's where all of our big capital items are budgeted, our street improvements, major building improvements, things like that. Water and sewer, those are our enterprise funds. They're meant to self-support themselves. And the revenue should always cover the spending in those funds. You can see in the water fund a significant decrease in fund balance, and that's due to a large project that's budgeted in 2026. After that project ends, we'll build that fund balance up again. And then the last fund on there is our police pension fund. We don't necessarily control it, but it's reported as part of our budget and our audit, and that's the pension fund for all of our sworn officers. You can see that it's grown throughout the years. It's a very healthy fund. The funding is about 65%, which is a very healthy fund percentage for a police pension fund. So I know I tend to talk fast, so if you have any questions, just kind of interrupt me, or if not, I'll keep going.
Okay, why is the motor fuel tax projected to be so low?
It's always going to be about that much going forward. The reason why it was growing year over year is because we had the Rebuild Illinois funds growing into the last 5 years. That ultimately led to the 83rd Street resurfacing project. So it will pretty much be at this 200 grand-ish level going forward. That's really just a pass-through. We get money from the state, we put it in the general fund, and it'll support our public works operations, but really it's a payback for the road program.
Anybody else have any questions? Thank you, Anne Marie. Keep going.
The next slide is just a kind of a really high-level revenue analysis. Based upon the state's budget, we'll be losing the grocery tax in 2026. That'll be about $200,000, we think, and we'll also be losing the nanophase rent sometime in 2026. Both of those values there are annualized, but those are both revenue sources of the general fund that will be lost, that we'll have to make up in other ways. Our sales tax continues to grow, but as part of our growth in our sales tax is due to a change in the law where use tax is no longer paid for out-of-state purchases, and instead a sales tax is paid. So while we are seeing a trend to increase in that tax, our use tax will most likely continue to go down. Income tax is at a record level. That's about 16% of our overall general fund revenues. So we hope that that does continue to grow. That's tax that comes out of the local government distributive fund. The state periodically talks about changing that distribution, but for now, it's a pretty solid revenue source for the village. Some other revenues, we finally got our AMI in place where we're doing the automated reading of water meters every month. We converted to monthly billing, and we had some rate increases. So when I talked a little bit earlier about the fund balance having a little bit of a lower balance, or the water fund having a little bit of a lower fund balance, that will continue to grow over time. The AMI is billing more usage. We're billing down to the gallon. We're able to catch things a lot quicker. We're able to catch leaks and things like that, which will help hopefully reduce our water loss. We have the 5 hotels. They remain strong. We've got a solid hotel motel fund that, like I said, provides funding not only for capital, but also for the village's special events each year. Next slide.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So
By the way, tonight, if anybody's just got a question, just jump in, okay?
100% of the homes are on the AMI in Burr?
Yes, there may be a few meters out there that we're still having to manually read for one reason or another, but probably 99.5 are on the AMI.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yep. So personnel, one full-time equivalent decrease for fiscal year 26. That's really made up of 2 part-time positions. But I think the most important thing to look at is that first column of numbers is from 2009. and the last column is 2026, and we are actually operating with less employees today than we were then, partially due to attrition, partially due to just being more efficient, using our technology better over the years. The revised org chart with using staff as opposed to consultants saved about $125,000 for the fiscal year 26 budget. Any questions? Keep going. So this is a slide of the general fund. There's a lot of detail on this page. This is the main operating fund of the village. It's all of our administrative departments, public works, police, central services, community development, finance, and IT. The most important thing I think on this slide is that our fund balance in our general fund is about 72% of our annual operating expenditures. Our policy is 25% with a goal of 30. So we are, 2.5 times where we need to be. So that is a very, very healthy fund balance. And that, just one comment too, that's with transferring about $5.8 million out of that fund over the last 3 to 4 years to fund our capital. So that's huge.
All right, I'm going to jump in for a few slides here. We're going to start going into the departments. This is a department by department view. We'll get into the later funds at the back half of this presentation. We're going to start with boards and commissions. This is just the budget, which reflects the legislative functions of the village, including those to the board and its designated boards, commissions, et cetera. There are no employees for budget purposes in this particular department. There are 8 elected officials sitting up here, of course. Those are reflected as FTE for the audit, but not the budget, just the way it works. The FY26 budget is 224,557. The majority of that's going to be our village attorney. They do a great job for us. As you can see, spending in that category for contractual services has been relatively flat over the last 3 years. We project that to be the same going forward in the future. Personnel services are really what the board is paid to be here tonight through your stipend, so that's what that is. This really does not have too much other function. There's no specific goals of this department. As I said, there's no FTEs in this department besides the elected officials, so this really is just some categorized spending. Okay. Moving on to the administration department, we are kind of like the hub and spoke of the village. We provide some direction, coordination to the other village departments. That is my department that I'm the department head in. We do a lot of those central services things. The main thing we really do is constituent intake. So when someone calls, comes to the window, that's us that provides that point of sale service. We also do things like FOIA, IT, risk management, labor relations, et cetera, as well as run our special event services. As was stated, we eliminated 2 part-time roles in FY 2025. We got leaner and meaner. As you can see, our budget has decreased about $90,000 from 25 projected to 26 budget. Again, that's primarily due to the loss of those 2 part-time roles. We did find some other savings in there that we felt were superfluous to the mission. I'm just going to go through some budget highlights for each of the operating departments, just so you can kind of see what's going on. In 25, we established our first ever organizational culture plan. This is for the staff. Our mission, vision, and values gives us something to unify around, talking about how we do the best we can for our extraordinary village that we have here. We conducted a community survey. We supported the EDC's creation of policies related to the business district and Cook County 6B incentives. We had a great year from IRMA's perspective. We had the highest possible safety rating. It resulted in lower insurance rate as well as receipt of interest income. That's been applied to our insurance this year, so we're almost getting free insurance this year for risk management purposes. So that's a credit to all of our operating departments who operate with very few accidents, very few injuries, and do things not only in a professional manner, but in a safe manner. So that saves us money. In 26, we'll be creating a human capital strategic plan for the organization. I think we do a pretty good job of this right now, but I want to create a single document which talks about a unified recruitment to retirement roadmap for all employees, talking about more importantly specifying training, human development, and things of that like. We're also going to do a next-gen technology strategic plan. Just a lot of cool new technology things coming online right now that we can better leverage. That's one of the reasons why we've been able to cut 2 employees is we have the BSNA system we're going to talk about in a bit, but really leaning into technology is something we can provide to our residents. And finally, we've got 2 labor agreements coming up. That's something we work on with labor relations and patrol for public works. Those will have expired at the end of this current fiscal year, and we're looking forward to getting new agreements on board with those employee classes. Questions? Okay. Go for it, Anne-Marie. Oh, I'm sorry, community development, I thought it was finance. So Janine is on vacation tonight, but we're gonna talk about this department. So this was spun back into a department in '25 as a standalone department. They do the planning, the zoning, the economic development, code, and engineering for the village at this point. Going into '26, they're gonna have 4 full-time and 2 part-time employees. They have 5 full right now. 1 full-time role is getting moved over to the Public Works Department, and that's the Assistant Village Engineer position you see in your budget. That position is gonna be responsible for doing a lot of the savings that we talked about a minute ago regarding keeping some of those costs in-house for consultancy reasons. We spend several $100,000s a year on consultants. We think this assistant village engineer position, which Dave will talk about in a little bit, can really help us save that money, as well as provide someone who will be at board meetings, provide a consistent point of contact for our residents and businesses, and really drive our service level forward while saving us a lot of money. As you can see in FY '25 projected in '26, those numbers are about the same. A lot of the contractual services come down to 2 things. Plan reviews, and in '25 it was also some monies related to the CNH review. As the board may recall, you put $100,000 in the budget to help us review that petition, so that's in there. And then in FY '26, we're going to be talking about the comprehensive plan update. This is something that the mayor's talked about at the board meetings in the past, but that was put in the budget as an update to its comprehensive plan. Again, that was a $100,000 budget line item. If we wanted to do a complete revision, which I haven't heard any direction on, that would be 2 or 3x the cost, and it would take a lot longer to do, but I don't think that's necessary. I think an update is all you need just to make sure that everything's in the right place, just get it tied down for the future. That's also a legal document in a lot of ways. An older comp plan can be used against you in court, so getting that tied down for the future is going to be great for our future planning. Another big thing that's been going on in community development has been related to online permitting. This is not something we've been offering in the past, but now you'll be able to see more and more rollout for, if you want to apply for a permit online, instead of having to come in here, you can not only apply for it, you can pay for it and pick it up online. You don't have to come into Village Hall. That option will still exist, but you don't have to then do that going forward. We started rolling that out slowly, just to make sure we've got our feet on the ground, but ultimately that's going to be open to everything going forward, everything from the fence all the way up to a new home, new business, whatever you've got. Finally, we'll be bringing back the contractor registration program. We've hinted at this in the past, specifically with the building permit and zoning fee schedule. This is something we think is going to be important relative to the board's previous discussions about making sure that work without a permit is something we do less and less of, or see less and less of as a village. This will require contractors to register with us, and if they violate our rules, they won't be able to work in the village. That'll also hold them more accountable to residents and make sure that work gets done quicker and more by the book for their benefit. Lastly, we're going to be continuing to rolling out the BSNA Cloud Enterprise software system. That's something that finance did a lot of work on in the past year. But again, continuing to roll those things out so that things like complaints from the residents can be better put in through our system at this point. All right. Now it's finance's turn. Thank you.
Finance has 2 full-time and 1 part-time employees. And then, as Evan mentioned, Heather and I are contracted consultants that work on a part-time basis. Our budget actually in finance went down a little bit, mostly due to savings on contractual services. Things are more automated, more streamlined. We don't need to be here as many hours as we have in the past, which is the ultimate goal. 2025 accomplishments, we got all 3 awards from GFOA. We love producing those documents for the village, and having those awards is good for a village, both financially and just kind of gives you kudos. We did lead the implementation of the BSNA Cloud Enterprise System, which was a great project. It's really helped so far, automating a lot of processes that were done more paper, more manually, and we'll continue to do that. We periodically review all of our financial policies and update them as needed. And then we also went out to bid for audit services with 5 other communities. We led the RFP process, and it actually brought us in some lesser audit fees for the next 5 years than we would have paid had we not done that. So that was a great project. We're going to continue the implementation of BSNA Cloud, including implementing fixed assets. That's something we only do for audit purposes, and it's always just been done manually in Excel spreadsheets, but we're going to bring it into BSNA so that we can further automate that process and save a lot of hours come audit time of us having to put those documents together. We're going to continue to produce those reports each year and submit it to GFOA. And then we're hoping to implement a new payment processor for all of our credit card payments. BSNA now has a payment processor of their own that they developed in-house, and we would like to move from Invoice Cloud to that. it will streamline not only our internal processes, but also make it more streamlined for our customers that are paying by credit card.
Chief,
Again,
Keep moving.
I'm sorry, Anne Marie?
I just wanted to say congratulations and great job with the GFOA awards for the audit and the budget 2 years in a row. I'm confident with the way the budget is prepared that we'll probably get a third award. And, you know, our budgets pass, get these awards, we pass our audits. I mean, we have very clean financials, so I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you. The police department, as you know, is responsible for providing public safety protection to residents and businesses of the community. We are 32 full-time employees, 28 sworn police officers, 4 administrative staff. Most of our major purchases were made in this year, so next year there's not going to be anything out of the ordinary or anything huge for you to worry about. This year, some of the highlights are with the success of our license plate recognition program. We've expanded into the downtown business area, and surveillance cameras will be going into that area within the coming weeks. We completed a 4-year cycle of assessments with the Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies, CALEA, receiving our 6th award since 2007. And our retired Chief Madden was presented with the Egon Bittner Award, recognizing a chief who has commanded a CALEA accredited agency for 15 or more continuous years. We transitioned to new firearms with red dot optic sights, and our officers continue to be very benevolent, raising money for charities and participating in numerous community events, including Shop with a Cop, National Night Out, Illinois Special Olympics in Burridge Park District, Pedal to the Parks. In the coming year, what we're looking at is the implementation of a contracted social worker, possibly with partnership with surrounding agencies, but if not, something we would like to go forward with. Contracted social workers provide services in calls involving mental health, domestic relations, drug and alcohol abuse, elder issues, such as neglect and hoarding, et cetera. What this provides is better follow-up when we go to these calls that an officer can't provide either on scene or with follow-up services. Social workers have been successful in some other surrounding towns, and it's something we would like to go forward with. Recruitment and retention is very important to us. Not only getting someone to work here, but getting people to stay here. The job market is pretty tight. We're competing against every other town with a police department to get good quality hires. What we would like to do, as Evan mentioned earlier with our recruitment plan, is update our website and provide highlights of our department for, you know, really showcasing what we are, what we do, and what the town is about, showing them the support we receive from the board, from the town, from the residents, really highlighting that so we can compete in this market. And lastly, what we're going to do going forward is participate in the Illinois Department of Transportation's Sustained Traffic Enforcement Program, which is called the STEP grant. One of the biggest concerns that we continually receive from residents is the traffic problems that they perceive or feel, you know, are occurring. Speeding vehicles, reckless drivers. And what the STEP grant will allow us to do is assign dedicated officers to target areas specifically to address these issues by hiring back officers on overtime so they can dedicate themselves to that and not have to worry about being pulled off to go answer other calls. So those are some of the highlights from the year and some of the plans that we have going forward.
Question, Chief, are you fully staffed? Do you need anyone else in terms of sworn officers?
We are not presently fully staffed. We are authorized for 28, and we're in the process of trying to hire that 28th person. I'll defer to the village administrator on additional service, on additional sworn officers.
Would the social worker be in addition to the 28?
The social worker would be contracted, so the plan we're looking at, if other towns got involved, is a model, a full-time model, but we would get a 40-hour employee. Burr Ridge would get that employee 10 hours a week. Hinsdale would get that employee for 10 hours a week. So it's contracted and it's not part of our,
With 4 villages?
with 4 towns, we would split that to about 10 hours. And we would start at that level and determine if we need to expand. I think a full-time social worker would be beneficial, but I don't know that we could support that yet. If they come in and knock our doors off and prove really valuable, maybe we expand that, but we start small and grow as it's needed. But as an example, just cursory looking at some calls for service over the last 4 or 5 years, we respond to about 100 to 110 domestic violence calls a year. Of those calls, there's maybe 3 to 8 arrests a year, which tells you that the other 100 calls are us going and mediating problems in someone's home that might be better fit once everything is died down and calm and people are separated, that a social worker could go in and offer services that the police department is just not able to do.
And do you think a social worker could probably identify red flags which never, the police department was not approached for if there was a social worker in place?
Possibly.
Like case in point, a recent situation.
Yes. I think it would help.
Thank you. So back to Gary's question, is 28 sworn officers, is that enough, or do we need more?
I think you can always do with more. I think the analysis through this year's budget was we're losing 2 major general fund resources in the grocery tax and the nanophase rent being all over $400,000. If that money were to be able to be recovered and then some, I think it's always the goal to make sure that we have very well-staffed operational departments. So I don't think there's a magic number where we're under or overstaffed. I'd like to add more though, but I'd like to add revenue to help us be sustainable in that regard. Because once we make an officer hire, then that's a pension obligation we have to make sure we're on board with. So I would love nothing more than to bring some on, but given that we're losing as much revenue as we were, I wanted to play it safe this budget.
We are at the number that has been authorized
That's
in the
correct.
past, so we are at 28.
Well, we're 1 short.
But
By
we're in the process of
authorization.
hiring.
Yeah.
Right.
We have an authorized number. We don't have that amount of sworn employees. We're hiring to that number.
Right.
And we need 1 more to reach that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yeah, Joe.
We hire another officer between the pension and everything. Just even if we start with a brand new one, it's like is it 125? Is it with all the pension?
No.
Per officer?
So I would say you're going to be at least 150.
150 per each hire. Okay.
Yeah, especially we're hiring more laterals right now. We're just finding more success with those. Laterals tend to start higher up at the range. Range right now is 114. That's just the cash wages. Plus you have benefits. You have Social Security. You have pension.
With the lawsuit, 400,000 or 500,000 of revenue, 101 other officers, 150. You need 650 to make it up.
Yeah, and there's also a lot of capital we got to pay for. So a lot of competing resources, a lot of competing priorities, I should say. And again, additional revenue would always make those decisions easier.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
Evening, David.
Good evening. Saving the best for last, and I mean that because we do talk about the big projects here in Public Works. But, it's like our road programs and sidewalks and pathways, water main projects, but it is really the expertise to plan and prioritize and maintain those projects that comes from the 10 full-time frontline guys, the 3 supervisors in operations, land and forestry, and our utilities, water, wastewater, and then our new deputy director that we filled out this past year. So with that, we're at 15, and we're adding 1, bringing that over from community development in the next fiscal year. That's that new assistant village engineer position. So we're abandoning the one called the development engineer, bringing a new position into Public Works called the assistant village engineer. Talk a little bit more about that on the next slide because it relates to a decrease in a lot of the contractual services that you'll see in the general fund and then the water fund. Because we've done a lot. In this past year, we filled out our new organizational chart with the new with the new deputy director. And then there's been some intelligences of other changes, some resignations. Then we did a lot of internal promotions. So our utility supervisor was promoted from the assistant water operator. The assistant water operator was promoted from a GU2. That GU2 then was promoted also from within, and one GU2 was an upgraded one in a new position, or in the Land and Forestry Department division. But the water fund works above and below ground. Above ground, we did our 300,000 gallon south water tower, repainted, refurbished off of 83rd Street. So you can see that from a distance off of Route 83 and 55 and throughout our town. But then below ground, up in the northeast end of town, replacing water main where there was inadequate fire flow or redundancy through the Woodview, South, Laurie, and Tomlin neighborhoods. Replace that project, and we're going to be doing more in the next year with those lessons learned. As you heard at the last meeting, the pathways and the road projects totaled about $2.4 million. That was about $100,000 under budget between 83rd Street, our road program, a little bit on 79th Street. That's an ongoing project. We are counting that as being done this fiscal year. We will get that done in the spring. We've been working with the fire districts because of our hydraulic water model that we did 4 years ago, because of our hydrant maintenance programs, because of the water main replacement that we did up in Woodview Estates. We are helping these fire protection districts increase their ISO rating. That's an insurance rating for them, but it also translates for a little bit for residents and businesses in Burr Ridge and the other towns that they've served. So they give credit a lot to the municipality, especially Burr Ridge, for the work we've done with them. And then you'll hear a little bit more about this at the March 10th board meeting, but we have a lot ongoing with the Wolf Road Corridor Study. We handle that in-house with our Corridor Advisory Committee members, Trustee Franzese, Administrator Walter, and myself. So March 10th, you'll hear a little bit more from that consultant and from Indiana Park about the work they've done to date. Coming up in our next fiscal year, of course, we talked about that assistant village engineer position. We are going to flesh that out a little bit. That's a position upgrade. Again, we've been into the development engineer position in community development that works well, but that's in-house over here. The assistant village engineer position we're bringing in at Public Works. So when we talk about the built environment, everything is going to be managed and maintained in Public Works. That engineering position then will be doing more of the capital projects, more of those resident engineer type jobs, construction engineering type, overseeing a lot of the projects like the water mains, some of the pathway projects, a lot of those kinds of things where we've been using consultants because we just didn't have some of the expertise or time. Again, by having the new deputy director to free up stuff on the operations side, a new assistant village engineer that has a little bit more time and expertise than myself, we can cover a lot more of those things in-house. Then again, we're, as we said, when we brought on our new deputy director, one of those things we're working towards is like Kalia with police. We've got the accreditation through the American Public Works Association that will help to memorialize some of the great work that our guys are doing. The HVAC upgrades at the police department, we've been hearing about that for a while. We're finally coming to that with over a $500,000 project to retire some old units that are just overtaxed and at the end of their life and bring in some efficiencies to the system over there and handle some issues we've been having over the years. And then our CIP project schedule, again, kind of tying in what that assistant village engineer position is for, is to, again, help prioritize and manage a lot of that going forward. We've got some equipment like in the CIP too, like a backhoe replacement. You just approved the stump grinder. We're going to be doing a lot of that kind of projects in-house, a lot of those maintenance of our parkway trees, just a better service level with some of that equipment. So appreciate that. Any questions?
I'd like to make one follow-up to our previous discussion about personnel. The survey has two very clear priorities from our residents, which is to have excellent public safety and excellent public works capital infrastructure. I don't want to overlook Dave. I think sometimes police steal the show, but I want to remember that this is a 7.5 square mile town and he's got 13 frontline employees. That's not even 2 per square mile, and it's also very not dense. So we're detailing a lot of roads, a lot of extra roads that those denser towns like Clarendon and Hinsdale don't have. A lot more water main, a lot more fire hydrants, a lot more trees. Just the way that the town is designed, it creates challenges for both police and public works because of how spread out the beats and the sectors are in our town. So we just said it'd be nice to add more police. I think we should at least also consider adding to public works as well. But again, for the same reasons, when almost $500,000 is coming off the table, the same thought process went through with Dave's department as well. One of the ideas we came up with, and I give Dave credit for it, is to bring in some of the savings through rehousing some of those services. So, you know, that would have been worse had we not done anything. We would have added more money back to the budget. We would have had less transfers through CIP, et cetera. But consistently, when you look at, you know, per capita staffing, that's one thing that I always want to remind the board of is just the way the town is built. We have to clear a lot of ground. I mean, we haven't talked about how good the roads are. The roads are good, despite us having by far the fewest number of employees per capita on a square mile basis. So it gives it even more credence to how good of a job Dave's people do. So I just want to overlook the fact that I can always use more guys to go out and get water mains done quicker, plow more roads, get cul-de-sacs cleaner, do work in-house, you know, move mowing in-house, whatever that happens to be. That's one of my pet projects, mowing. But I just don't want to lose sight of that. I understand police are very important. I'm not trying to say they're not, but I think we as Village Hall, we sit inside, we have it easy. Those two departments go outside and do hard work. I want to make sure they're staffed, and that's why we were willing to take the loss first for efficiency's sake. So just wanted to make that note for the record.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, David.
Okay, I'm going to highlight a couple of organizational departments here. First is IT. No personnel is associated with this. This is really just what it costs to run the village from a technological perspective. Contractual services, basically three things. That's our technology consultant, Orbis. When something doesn't work, we call Orbis. They're very good. There's also things like Flock, Axon body cameras, Dugis, our police records management system, and a number of other things that we've got through the village to make everything work technologically. This is pretty much that. As you can see in here, I'm probably going to fold this into central services next year just because it's a reporting department. So is central services. It's kind of duplicative. So this may go away next year, but this is really just related to technology. You'll see it's a little higher in the current fiscal year, 819. That is almost related to the additional Flock cameras that the board approved. We'll call it 3 months ago. We made a one-time payment to pay for it up front with cash on hand. That's why that's there, and that's funded through a general fund transfer from the business district. Questions? Okay. Second one is central services. This is really a reporting department. Its function is basically to do things that really don't fall in any one department. So a lot of our like village hall operating supplies fall in here. But really this thing exists solely to do the transfers. You can see in the bottom line, this is, if you see the transfers back in the original budget, this is where they come out of. And this is just a budgeting item that we have here. Questions? Okay. Anne Marie? That is the end of the general fund.
So I did touch on all of these funds kind of at the back here earlier, but I'll just go through them quickly. So motor fuel tax fund, it needs to be a separate fund per state statute. So we get all of our motor fuel tax collections go into this fund, both the regular motor fuel as well as the transportation renewal fund. We transfer out of this fund to partially fund our streets department. As Evan said earlier, we're going to maintain somewhat of a fund balance in this fund so that we can have funds available if there's ever a need for a match or something like that on a capital project. Next fund is hotel motel. Kind of touched on this also. We get our hotel motel taxes deposited into this fund, and we spend on our special events as well as transfers to our general and CIP fund out of this fund each year. Still has a healthy fund balance at the end of 2026 projected. Next one. Downtown Business District. This is our business district fund. Our 1% business district tax is deposited into this fund. Very few projects will actually be budgeted for in this fund. We'll most likely see transfers out of this fund to fund different types of projects within the business district. An example is the Flock Hammer expansion project that you see there. There was a transfer out in 2025 for that program. Capital Improvement Fund. is not necessarily self-supporting. The intergovernmental line item would be any grants that we receive from outside agencies. And then there's just some miscellaneous revenue that's most likely just made up of interest earnings on the amount of cash in the bank. Improvements are going to be any of those non-enterprise capital projects that we have going on for the year. And for 2026, we've got about $1.5 million in general capital projects in this fund. They're listed down below. 2025, we had a road program, Elm Street Culvert, and the 79th Street Pathway, partially funded by transfers from the general fund, partially transferred by, or funded by grants. And then we have about $800,000 in 2026 budgeted. It sounds, I don't know anything about what we applied for, but we did apply for a grant of $2 million for projects that are going to be in the future and aren't necessarily included in the 2026 budget.
That's 4 or 5 individual funds together. So
Okay.
we've got things like, you'll notice like the Parkview Basin project down in the Parkview neighborhood. It's $1 million project. We put in for about 800. Okay, Dave's nodding at me. We did not get it this year, but I think we were like 14th out of 80 on our first try. So I feel very good about that. So always looking for other people's money to pay for our projects.
Water fund, it's an enterprise fund meant to be self-supporting, so the user fees that we charge for providing water to our customers is intended to support the operating expenses and capital expenses of this fund. Once again, we talked about the fund balance, a little bit low at the end of 2026 due to a large project, but going forward, we'll build that fund balance back up. As far as the highlights of this fund, I think if you have any questions on them, they're kind of listed out. Woodview Estates water main project, the South Water Tower painting, finalizing IGA with Hinsdale. If you have any specific questions, we can have Dave come back up here. In 2026, there's a number of projects listed, that first one being the Carriageway Water Main Project, which is really why you see that decrease in fund balance in the water fund just for the 1 year.
So, a few years ago, and it was the goal to right-size that fund so it was getting revenue, so it would sustain itself. And it appears that that worked.
Yes.
Is that
Oh, yeah.
correct?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I'll point out, so I was going to point this out anyway. So if you look FY23 actual commodities, 4294503, that is effectively what we're paying Bedford Park for water on a wholesale basis. Charges for services 7215643 going up to 25, projected 9030. That's a combination of the rate structure going into place as well as the AMI catching all the unbilled water, getting rid of all the old meters, the census meters. Now we have census meters. All the old drive-by radio meters. The AMI, I think we said it was going to have a 2 to 3 year payback. I bet it had a 3-month payback.
Yeah.
Just based on all the found unbilled water we had. So, this is allowing us to do almost $10 million in cash in projects in 2 years and still have $1 million fund balance. And it will continue to have $1 to $2 million projects every year going forward that we'll do in-house. Not going to have as many contractual, that's why you see the contractual number go down. So this is really rocking and rolling. There's already no lead in the village, but we already have pretty young pipes. This is really going to put the gas on that and really make that be less of an issue going forward. I think the thing I'm most proud of is that our water rates are still bottom third in DuPage County, despite the adjustment. So we're getting everything we pay for and nothing we're not.
Yeah, it was good stuff.
Any other questions?
No.
Hearing none.
The sewer fund, once again, this is an enterprise fund intended to be self-supporting. The fund balance is pretty consistent over the years, meaning that we have the rates set sufficient to cover the cost or the operating costs of the fund. Police pension fund, we touched on this earlier. I just wanted to kind of mention a few things. At April 30th of 2020, the funding status was about 58%, and at 4/30 of 2024, we're at 63.95%. So the funding status has gone up over the last few years. We changed from a statutory minimum contribution to a recommended contribution, which has helped greatly. The fund is maturing, meaning that we're paying more out in pension payments than we're receiving in from the officers. So that recommended contribution is a good thing to keep our funding status high, as well as we've got good investments through IPO PIF, in order to get those market returns.
That recommended payment, that's actuarial based,
Actuarially determined, yes.
and that's what the board voted to do, was to follow what the actuaries were telling us to put in.
Yes, yes, as opposed to the statutory minimum, yes.
And so we end up actually putting in more
Yep.
than the statutory minimum.
Yes, yep.
Thank you.
All right, this is our last slide of substances, we'll call it, and we go to the conclusion. So the Street and Pathway Committee at their January 13th meeting requested additional information only about extra revenue opportunities for the village to pursue. These are all things that we could pursue in one form or another to, in some form, add to the capital programming. So I'm going to just read these down. So the first one is the non-home rule sales tax. So there's kind of a two-pronged approach here. You're currently at 0.25%. I'm going to call it 15 years ago, the village residents, through a referendum, voted 0.5%. The board could put in place for public safety purposes. If you were to put that in place, that would bring you another $500,000 about in revenue. However, go ahead,
So
sorry, Mayor.
we voted in 0.5%, the village voted in 0.5%, you'll remember. And the board then decided only to use a quarter. That's why the other quarter is still there.
Correct. The state law now, though, says you can go all the way to 1 without referendum as a non-home rule community. So that would add another $1 million about to the budget. So you could have another $1.5 million if you went all the way to 1. However, I do want to note that the voters approved you up to 0.5%. Right now, non-home rule on a quarter point brings in 530. That's why I'm rounding down a little bit just to be conservative, but it could be a little bit more than that if you took it all the way out. A stormwater fee, this is something that I think would require a lot more input. There's no real limit to what you can do. Some towns have it, some towns don't, but it would basically be applied to some sort of bill for the residents to pay for stormwater projects. I wrote $500,000 in there because I've seen them as low as $100,000. I've seen them as much as $10 million in Downers Grove where I live. It gets expensive. There's either a fixed fee you see on a utility bill, or there's an impervious surface calculation that they use to calculate the impact fee. But that would pretty much be used for stormwater projects. Vehicle stickers, again, information only. We're going to call that $250,000. Red light camera, information only. It's per intersection, per infraction. We're going to call it $100 per violation, about $200,000. I think there's limited opportunity there, candidly. There's a few intersections which might qualify, but the fact is we only have so many cameras in the village, or lights in the village, traffic signals we could use. Something we could look at. You have to prove it to the state that you need it on a safety basis. So that one's maybe. Hotel motel, this is pretty restricted. You could go from 4 to 5% as a non-home rule community. It would yield you an extra $200,000, but really 75% of that $200,000 would go back for overnight tourism promotion. It only yield you about $50,000 in additional capital funding. We have a nice, being at 4 is a nice competitive advantage for us right now. I wouldn't recommend that one, candidly. The grocery tax is here only because it's $200,000 a little farther down the list. This is something you can put in now, and it would take effect on January 1st, 2026. The state gave all communities the ability to do this. If you wanted to have it in place to pick up again by January 1st, you'd have to pass it by October 1st, 2025. Is that correct, Council? Sound about right?
Thinking that's a September date.
September, okay.
Yeah.
So it has to be at least 90 days out from that thing. Place of eating tax, there's actually no limit on what you could put on place of eating tax. Some towns have up to 2%. I wrote $137,500 per 0.25% increment. So you could tax the restaurant specifically. That's a philosophical decision, but that's available to you. And finally, there's
What is it now?
1%.
1%.
1%. That's a pretty common number for those who have food and bev. And then there's something called a gasoline tax. There was an interesting state law that said that all towns in Cook County can pass a gas tax on the gas stations in their community, but they said later in the law that all you had to do was touch Cook County to actually have it apply. All of our gas stations are in DuPage County, and thus we touch Cook County and have gas in DuPage County, so we legally can levy an up to a 3-cent limit on our gas tax, and that would bring in about $125,000. The two gas stations that we would be affecting right now would be Shell and Thornton's. So if some towns have that and it brings in millions, think like Bensonville, Naperville, Schaumburg, big towns. Yes, trustee.
On the grocery tax,
Yes.
isn't something that's a tax that's going to be put on by a majority of the communities before the end of the year?
I would say that as time goes on, the majority of communities are starting to put them on the agenda. So Clarendon Hills just approved it, or I think they're definitely considering it. I know Downers Grove is. I think other towns will as well. That currently is collected by the state. It will then be collected by municipalities that pass that ordinance at that point. But you're correct, more towns are looking at that. And again, these are your options. These are, I want to be clear, we did not receive support or direction from the board to implement these. I'm sorry.
Joe?
Yes.
Place of eating tax, Hinsdale, Willowbrook, are they at 1, or are they at 1.25?
I would say the majority on the bell curve will be at 1. Some are at 2. I think Lombard's at 2. Some don't have it at all. 1 would be the mode. You know, the majority of towns will be at 1.
That's where we're at now.
That's what you're at now, yeah.
Thank you.
So these are options. Again, we're looking at $450,000 in revenue that we're not going to get supposedly in '26.
So I want to be clear. You're going to get some of that money in '26. Those are annualized. If you did nothing and '27 came, that's what it would be. The grocery tax goes through Jan 1, '26, so you can assume about 2/3 of that you'll realize, 130 grand. Nanophase wants to leave in August, so you'll see some of their rent, but you will see those after this coming year, those will be gone. So that's why I'm saying, you know, you got a year to think about it, budget's good, make decisions now.
So these are things we're going to look at and come back and maybe make some suggestions. Personally, red light cameras to me are off the list. We don't need red light cameras in this village. But the others I think we can look at, and probably the one that's likely to come to you is the grocery tax. But we'll see. That generally, in my opinion, is a regressive tax in neighborhoods where another 1% on $1 on 100 can mean something. I think in our community here, however, $1 more on a $100 grocery bill, I think is something the village could be okay with. But go ahead.
But since you voted 15 years ago to go to 1%, you were only at a quarter.
Half a percent.
And so you have it 15 years ago. You want to hire another officer possibly for some additional safety. My first thing is, that's right in line with something that would be my
We're
vote.
authorized, we don't, but again, that's a sales tax increase, so yes, that's good for revenue, but, what's it gonna do to shopping? I don't know, but these are questions that we'll get through. I would say the next one on there to look at is that 0.25%. I know the history on vehicle stickers here in the community. People really don't want to see vehicle stickers, and then the administrative cost eats right into that $250,000 projection. So that might be something that we don't consider. But obviously, if any of the 6 of you want to consider something that's on this list, we will consider it. Or if there's something else that somebody comes up with. But we are going to look to replace the lost income over time. Yes, Anita?
So the grocery tax is something that is coming off. So if we put it back on, then it's kind of, people are still used to it,
Right.
right? So then I
Putting
think-
it back on before it expires.
Right, and then I feel the stormwater fee makes sense because a lot of projects which take a lot of money are stormwater projects. Or some
Used to
of them
be,
at
but
least.
ours aren't. We don't have the stormwater issues the village had 20 years ago. Is not to say we don't have stormwater issues, but I'm not quite sure how that works, so I'd like to know a little bit more about who actually ends up paying that stormwater fee.
That's going to be residents.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not a.
Is that a percentage of the bill, or is it just like?
Two most common ways are we come out through LiDAR, which is a fancy way of saying we measure everything in your backyard. Let's say your backyard's 1,000 square feet and you have 100 square feet of impervious, call it a patio. We'll put that in some sort of tier and you pay a per rate dollar amount to the village that then is used to offset the impact of your impervious surface. And people with more impervious surface theoretically pay more. In towns like Downers Grove, you can then build things like a French drain or the like, which then decrease your stormwater impact. So there's, I hate to call it a lot of moving pieces. Some towns have gone to something like fixed rate on a utility bill, $5 a bill. It's a lot less work, but it's not as, call it egalitarian or fair per se. Everyone just pays the same rate, whether you've got the greenest backyard or an airport hangar. So that one can get complicated if you want it to.
The good news is, we're in great fiscal shape. There are some things we're looking down the road to increase. There are things about the police and public works we want to do, but we have the luxury of time. So these are items that we should consider in due course, add to others. But the good news is, we'll probably be able to take the action we want to take based on a considered decision and not in a panic situation.
Exactly.
Okay? That's the luxury of sound fiscal planning, which this village has always done, or at least that's been the goal, and we've accomplished it most of the time. So we're in great shape. Are there some holes that we want to fill that are coming up in the fabric? Fabric's still without any holes in it, but there could be a couple of holes. Yes, we want to look at possibly filling those holes, and we have lots of options to work with.
So we have till September to make this decision or make it?
That's
on the grocery tax.
On the groceries tax, it might be. We could do it after that, but if we wanted to make it seamless, to Anita's point.
If there's two, let's say one or two of those choices.
Right.
We could do them by September.
Right.
So seamless going into the budget for '26.
Right, and one of the things the legislature may do this session before the end of May is there may be a non-home rule grocery tax day where everybody who opts in, so you don't even have to pass anything, all the non-home rule communities can opt in on one day or 1 week, so that everybody's doing it at once, for the obvious political cover that would provide all the villages when you put a grocery tax in place. So we're not the only community looking to keep it.
The gas tax that you said just the Shell, or it'd be Shell and Thornton's, right?
Shell and Thornton's.
Both.
But, I mean, I think a lot of people who are using Thornton's are not even Burr Ridge residents, they're just people on the highways, so, yeah.
Yeah, and that's the idea that I think we always think about is this tax going to be paid by residents? That's why we don't want to do vehicle stickers, we don't want to do
Cameras.
stormwater, and even cameras are probably likely to affect our residents more than anybody. So is there other ways to do this? Grocery tax might be one way, although a lot of our own place of eating tax, that's probably spread out by a lot of communities. So again, we have a lot of things to think about and a lot of good options.
Okay. As I said at the beginning, this was our educational session. Last opportunity to discuss this will be on March 10. We're not going to repeat this presentation. We're just going to talk about any changes which may have come up. I don't anticipate any, or any final direction from the board. And again, April 14th is our public hearing, where we pass the budget, we go on with life. With this, I'll turn it back over to the mayor. Can I have any
So
final discussion?
Evan will reach out to each of you, as he always does, after tonight, and ask, any other ideas, any other things that you want staff to do, to present, so that we have a very thorough opportunity to pass the budget. If there's no other budget questions, then we can go to reports and communications. Let me start with the chief on reports and communications. Yes.
Quick comment on the budget and the budget presentation. I just want to commend staff, Evan, everyone else who's contributed immensely to this budget. It is easy to understand. It is well thought out, it is concise, yet it provides sufficient detail so we can make intelligent decisions. And I want to commend everybody for that, Amy as well, so we're all good. Thank you for this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Chief? I've asked the chief to give the board and the public an update on the very tragic, very unfortunate domestic violence situation that happened Friday, late afternoon, early evening. The chief has kept me advised all weekend, and he's got an updated report for you and the community. Go ahead, Chief.
Thank you, Mayor. As you've heard, today, pretrial release was denied for a Burr Ridge man charged with the murder of his mother. While the charges have been filed, this investigation is ongoing, so I cannot share specific details of this case. Also, we have a family in suffering, and I will limit my comments to a few brief facts to avoid compounding further trauma. On Friday, February 21st at 6:38 p.m., we were called to the home in the 9100 block of Madison to investigate a domestic battery. It is alleged that Oscar Rodriguez Jr., 37 years old, battered his mother, then left the residence. His mother was taken to the hospital because of sustained injuries. Rodriguez Jr. was stopped by the Illinois State Police and brought to our station where, with the assistance of the DuPage County State's Attorney's Office, he was charged with 2 counts of attempted first-degree murder and 1 count of aggravated domestic battery. Yesterday, the victim passed away as a result of her injuries, allegedly sustained from Rodriguez Jr. Rodriguez Jr.'s charges were upgraded to first-degree murder this morning. He is being held at the DuPage County Jail pending his next court date. I personally would like to thank DuPage County State's Attorney Bob Berlin and his staff, and especially the Burr Ridge officers and detectives that worked tirelessly long hours throughout the weekend to see this case successfully resolved. I'd also like to thank Administrator Walter and Mayor Grasso for being in constant contact with me this weekend, just making sure the officers had everything that they needed at their disposal. So thank you for that. With that, I don't feel any questions can be answered at this moment, but I'm always available if you need me.
Thank you, Chief. And just keep us updated, and thank you very much. All right, Anita, sorry.
Oh,
You
okay.
have the floor.
Reports and communications. Well, we have a lineup of events for this summer and fall that staff is preparing. But the first coming attraction will be Armed Forces Day or celebration at the Village Greens on May 16th in the evening. But the formal Armed Forces ceremony will be at the Village Hall on May 17th in the morning. So stay tuned for upcoming events. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Anita. Anybody else? Any trustees? No? I have a couple of things. First, at the next meeting, March 10, not only will we be dealing with the budget, but the discussion about a new village hall will be front and center on March 10. And I'm going to make sure that Evan gets that out to the public so that any members of the public who want to attend and ask questions will be available. So hopefully there won't be a lot to do on the budget. Between now and then, you'll get your questions and answers, hopefully, to Evan, and but we will also take up the Village Hall. In that regard, a comment was made at the last meeting that the police department came in well over budget back in 2009-8. And I took a little exception to that because my memory was, in fact, quite the opposite. And so I went back into the archives with Evan's help, and I was surprised at how thorough that I must call out several names. The trustees that were on the board at the time of all of these important decisions included Bob Sodikoff, Bob Grella, Dwight Declouette, Maureen Watt, Dave Allen, not our deputy chief, but Dave Allen, and Al Paveza. And I was, again, proud and impressed at how thorough all the discussions and all the different options on a new village hall, which was front and center that time. This is 2006, 2007, 2008. it was a new village hall, a new village hall, a new village hall somewhere else. And then after the Space Needs Committee came back with reports, the board switched to a new police department. And it was then decided that even though the new police department would probably cost $8 million, that was the bids, that was the projections, and a new village hall at the time would be more in an area of 5 to 6, we felt the community wanted the police department. Remember, the police department was in this building. Okay? And so we did own the land where the police department sits here, and so the decision was made to go forward with a police department with a budget in the neighborhood of $8 million, with the goal of trying to get it down to 7.5 to 7.2, which was a pretty healthy reduction from 8 million. And so the new village hall was deferred, and Bob Grella, for example, said, why don't we rent space over in the village hall, in the new village center? There were several options, including building the police station where it is and then adding another building beside it, and then selling this property for another use. So there was a lot of that. And by the way, the final figures for the police department came in much closer to 6 million. So it was projected to be 8. The goal was to bring it in at 7.2 at best, and it came in much closer to 6. So that board, in my opinion, had done a tremendous job getting us a new police facility. But remember, the goal then, 2006, 7, 8, 9, was to build a new village hall over there and do something else with this building. And here it is, February 24, 2025. So we will discuss a new village hall again on March 10, 2025.
And not take the side road to a new police department this
Right,
time.
right. And so with that, I'd like to get a motion to adjourn to the next meeting, March 10, 2025 at 6:30 PM.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned.